With space in our cities at a premium, innovations around urban manufacturing and food production are gaining pace, with indoor vertical farming one of the first initiatives to really take hold. With climate change impacts, food security and supply chain disruptions all creating a sense of uncertainty for our future, is this the future of cropping? University of Queensland's Paul GAUTHIER is Professor of Protected Cropping at the Queensland Alliance of Agriculture and Food Innovation, and he joins me now. Welcome, Professor. How can urban vertical farming ever scale to the extent that it can make a meaningful contribution to food supply and demand?
Well, I think vertical farming is, I will say, part of the future in a way that we need to scale it up. And as you mentioned a little bit, climate change is going to challenge a lot of our food system. And it's not necessarily about how is it possible to do it, is more can we make it work? Because I think one of the major issues that we are facing, we have a challenge, which is increasing food production by 70% by 2050 to be able to feed the world. And unfortunately, the amount of land available to grow this food is decreasing. And so we have to make it work. And a lot of cities across the world have already taken this, I will say, stream of research and stream of production. And it's actually working pretty well in some cities, like, right outside New York City, there is a lot of different vertical farming feeding the cities, and it actually works pretty well. So there is a challenge still. It's a new, I would say, technology or a new way of growing crops in a certain way. But it's the scalability and the scaling up is what will make it work.
Well, you've spoken about the demand to feed the planet over the next decades, and food security is becoming an increasingly serious issue for many nations. How much is this accelerating the pace of innovation and research?
I think it have been a really booster for the entire industry. What you could see is over the past 3 years, the world have faced an unprecedented pandemic that nobody were actually expecting. And what we realize is how dependent on our food import and how dependent on other countries many countries are at the moment. And it was very, very challenging. And now with what's going on in Eastern Europe, I think it's, a lot of people are questioning their own food security and how they can be independent. Some countries import up to 97% of their food. So all of that are really boost up the industry, because people have realized that, yes, there is an energy challenge with vertical farming, but they can eventually feed their people. And one of the things that I think it's considering, when people are starving, what's the cost of being able to feed these people if you have the capacity of doing it?
Now, the University of Queensland, who you work with, is offering 2 scholarships for PhD students to join your team of researchers. So what can the students expect in terms of where this research is heading?
My intention with this research is to go to the next step. The reason why vertical farming got started very quickly is because, well, of course, the cost of LEDs were part of the reason, but also because the knowledge of growing lettuce hydroponically was already there. And so what I'm thinking of doing, and what my team is going to focus on, is to look at what are the crop of the future. What kind of crop can we grow indoor? What are the next one? I'm not talking about the ones that the industry are going to release in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm talking about the ones the industry will need in 5 and 10 years, when climate change will be so bad that we may not be able to grow bananas anymore in Queensland, or maybe we won't be able to grow some crops or not even importing them. And there is a lot of cost associated with importing at the moment, and some countries like coffee or vanilla or cacao are decreasing their production across the world because of climate change and because of all the consequences. So in 5 or 10 years, will the world accept not to have coffee to drink in the morning, or will the world accept not to have a piece of chocolate anymore? So I think that's what my team is going to focus on. We are going to focus on all these interesting crops that nobody have really looked into so far, of growing indoor at scale and also profitably. So that's kind of things that we are looking into and developing for Australia and for the rest of the world.
How does Asia Pacific, for example, compare to North America and Europe? You were talking about Princeton in New Jersey, not far from New York. You're originally from Nantes in France. So where's APAC compared to the rest of the world?
So I will say the first country leading all the development, R&D, and everything is the US. The US had a very specific agricultural system, which leads them to think about vertical farming as a solution for the future. And the Asian Pacific is catching on. China have been working on vertical farming for quite a while, but we don't necessarily hear too much about it. And then we also have, countries like Singapore or South Korea or even Japan that have been looking into vertical farming for quite a while.
Where do you think we'll be in 10 years' time? Will this industry have matured to become a major supplier of crops, the crops that the world desperately will need in the decades to come?
I think it does. I think for sure. When I started working on vertical farming back in 2015, people were questioning, is even vertical farming a thing? People were questioning the fact that maybe vertical farming is never going to work in the rest of the world. Well, today it's everywhere. And so I think the industry is really growing extremely fast. And I will say, if the old continent, right, Europe, have been taking out on vertical farming, that really means something, because Europeans tend to be a little bit taking distance on a lot of this new technology and catching up a little bit longer. But the fact that they are taking on very quickly now on all this technology means a lot. And I think, by 2050, we'll have 2 billion more people to feed on this planet. And unfortunately, today, we already have 800 to 900 million people already not eating enough food. And so if you add 2 billion to that, vertical farming have to be part of the solution. There is no question about it. And I think, to be clear, and because I have this question very often, vertical farming is not going to replace traditional farming. We need traditional farming to continue improving and to continue doing what traditional farming has been doing. We just need vertical farming to add up to be able to feed the 2 billion people that we are going to add on this planet by 2050.